Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make my contribution in Budget 2020 debate under a theme that is reflective of the budget and a budget with measures to realize that theme. Mr. Speaker, let me join with my colleagues to commend the Honorable Bishop Juan Ejil and his team for presenting the forest emergency budget of our government in record time. And I would like to use the words of the Honorable Minister as I describe the budget as a no nonsense, no frills, no bluff, people centered, pro poor, results oriented approach, the launching the nation back on the path to prosperity after the hardship imposed by this nation during the last 5 years by the APNU AFC government. Mr. Speaker, a national budget usually takes maybe 150 days to be prepared and presented in the National Assembly. However, under the guidance of His Excellency Dr. Irfan Ali and Honorable Vice President Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, we have completed that budget in a record time of 27 days. Mr. Speaker, like them or not, these are two geniuses when it comes to economics. Maybe two of the best economists in Guyana and the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, I was a bit taken back listening to the Honorable Member Cathy Hughes because I was told that the Honorable Member is the Shadow Minister for Natural Resources. However, what we heard for the last 20 or 25 minutes from the Honorable Member is a lot of storytelling and wild assertions, which cannot take our country forward. Mr. Speaker, I would like to outline our strategic objectives for 2020, which include bringing under control the spread of the COVID-19 and opening up the economy and restoring economic activity to a level of normalcy. Mr. Speaker, we have heard so many comments about the COVID-19 pandemic from the previous speaker and also other speakers on the opposition benches. But it is sad that we are trying to use the COVID pandemic for politicking. It is sad that we're using the COVID pandemic to gain cheap political points when people are suffering. To deal with the COVID pandemic, we must take a national approach. We must work together to bring the COVID pandemic under control. It is sad that the previous member would have mentioned that the cases are skyrocketing. But what the member did not mention is that under the previous administration, when we took over government only a month ago, that the amount of tests conducted every day or per day was only 31 tests per day on average. Only 31 tests per day. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to inform that under our administration and only 1 month in government, we have increased testing to almost 300 per day. To almost 300 per day. Mr. Speaker, a month ago, there were only about 2 or 3 trained persons to conduct the test in this country. Imagine that. And the previous administration was preparing and would have spent $160 billion over the last 7 to 8 months. And not a cent was spent to train people to conduct the COVID tests. Today we have more than 40 persons who have been trained to conduct the COVID tests. And when we talk about COVID, Guyanese are reminded of the COVID hospital, a mere shell for over 1 billion Guyana dollars expended here, with no one trained to man that facility, no oxygen facility in the hospital. How can we take patients to a mere shell when we would have expended over 1 billion Guyana dollars on a property that is not even owned by the government of Guyana? Mr. Speaker, that is criminal. Mr. Speaker, 2020, the year 2020, will go down as a memorable day in the history of Guyana. Some people say it will go down as the year when you had massive reincarnation. You had massive reincarnation based on the APNU AFC, when the dead came out from the ground and voted and went back into their tombs. The year 2020 would be remembered as a year when a country was being hijacked and when elections were being attempted to rig and we were going back into the dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, there were many mentioned in this House about SOPs. I would like to say that I have seen all of the 2,339 SOPs for all the polling stations throughout the country. I don't know how many on the opposition benches have actually seen the SOPs, but yet we claim fraud. Yet we claim fraud, but we have not seen a single polling statement of poll. But yet we claim fraud. Mr. Speaker, 2020 will be remembered as the 33 days that we spent at this facility where we recounted every single ballot. And it still showed that the People's Progressive Party got over 15,000 votes, more than the AP and UAFC. And that is a fact. And that is a fact, Mr. Speaker. 2020 would be remembered as a year when Guyana starts to breathe again with the return of the People's Progressive Party civic and government. 2020 will be remembered as a budget that is pro-investment, pro-poor, pro-working class. A budget that will take us and prepare the foundation for 2021 and beyond. Mr. Speaker, let us also remind the House that of the $330 billion allocated, $160 billion has already been spent by the AP and UFC. So when you sit in this House and you condemn the budget, you have already spent $160 billion out of the $330 billion. Mr. Speaker, this emergency budget was commended by a number of individuals and a number of organizations in and out of Guyana. In and out of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2020, we were told by former President, Mr. David Granger, that it is a copycat budget, that it is an APNU budget. But yet we have heard almost every single member on the opposition benches condemning Budget 2020. Are you saying that Mr. David Granger is wrong? Are you condemning his comments as well too? What we have heard from the opposition benches is a regurgitation of 2015 and 2011. That is what we have been heard over the last day and a half. And in that vein, I wish to commend the honorable member, Ms. Philadelphia. I believe, in all right, her speech was very objective and very forward-thinking when she spoke about training of young people to manage the oil and gas sector. And I want to let you know that that is the intention of the People's Progressive Party administration. Because there was no local content framework in place, even though the APNU AFC preached about oil and gas and forced oil for so many years. There was a policy that was more targeted to benefiting the companies and not the official locals. But we intend to ensure that we have a strong local content policy followed by regulatory framework so that our locals can enjoy the benefits of the oil and gas sector. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2020 is not a lumpy-pumpy budget. Budget 2020 is not a pro-private sector budget, as the opposition might want to say. Budget 2020 is a people's budget. Many have said it is a pro-private sector budget. My friends, that is the mistake that the AP and UFC made, and that is why you're sitting over that side of the House. Because of it, instead of incentivizing the private sector, you penalize the private sector. Because no government in this world can create employment for all its people. You need the support of the private sector. And that was your mistake. And that is what you continue to do. And that is why you will remain over there for a very long period of time. Because we cannot see SOPs still. Mr. Speaker, let me highlight some of the measures that Budget 2020 will address. Increase of old age pension to $25,000. It is not only about the increase in the old age pension, Mr. Speaker, but our Minister of Social Services is taking steps to ensure that this money goes to the homes and the villages of these poor pensioners. In the past, these pensioners got to sit under a shed with the umbrella or line up by the post office in Georgetown to collect their $20,000. We are taking steps so that this money can go to the doorsteps of our pensioners. We are also, and I'm happy to tell the Honorable Member Henry too, that we are taking steps to ensure that the shop owners in the hinterland don't take advantage of the pensioners, because we know that happened under the past administration, where the pensioners take their voucher for $20,000, but they receive only $10,000 or $15,000 in return for goods. So we are working to ensure that our pensioners in the hinterland, they will get the full share of the increase. Mr. Speaker, the return of the cash grant and the increase of the cash grant to $15,000. Mr. Speaker, another promise fulfilled to the children of this country. Unfortunately, and the opposition still boasts about it, that the 5Bs program is better than the cash grant. Now, how can a right-thinking person actually say something like that? The 5Bs program, and if you do the mathematics, anybody can do the mathematics. The 5B program was benefiting maybe 10,000 children in this country. You add up the amount of seats in each David Granger bus, you add up the seat in every boat that you distribute, you add up how much bicycle you distribute, and it won't reach 10,000. It will not reach 10,000. And if you're not aware, we have over 170,000 school children in the public school systems. Over 170,000. But the 5B program was benefiting 10,000 students. How can it be better? How can it possibly be better, my friends? The removal of VAT on essential items and goods. In 2015 and beyond, there was a promise to reduce VAT. So yes, it was reduced from 16 to 14, but there was a backlash as usual under the AP and UFC. They increased the amount of items that you have to pay VAT to, including medical supplies, including school supplies, including construction materials. Mr. Speaker, we are removing the VAT on all these goods and services in Budget 2020. Another promise realized in 1 month. Another promise realized in 1 month, Mr. Speaker. This, of course, will significantly reduce the cost of living. Charging people VAT on electricity and water is almost criminal in a country like Guyana. My friends, the $25,000 COVID relief. We have heard comments, snide comments about pittances. Can you say to the people of Guyana, how much have you given to them? How much of this $160 billion that you already spent in 2020 was spent on the people of Guyana? How much of that 160 was given to the people while they were suffering under the COVID pandemic? My friend and colleague, the Honorable Sanjeev Datudin, would have outlined how that 160 million was spent. It was spent on bringing in lawyers to determine whether 33 is greater than 32. It was spent on lawyers to determine whether the word valid actually means valid. It was spent on lawyers to tell you that you lost the election. That is where the money went, instead of spending it on the people who needed relief during this COVID pandemic. That is where the 160 billion went. $800 million to the Amerindian Development Fund. And my friend again, the Honorable Henry, while I believe he's not fully equipped with the fact in terms of the CSO program. I asked that he equip himself with the fact, and he would see how the CSO program will benefit almost 2,000 young Amerindians, brothers and sisters. Incentives to the agriculture sector, because agriculture has always been important to this country. Agriculture is the reason for all of us being in this country, and we must look after agriculture. And I want to commend too our agriculture minister, who has been doing a wonderful job so far. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we had promised that we will reopen the sugar estates, and we will do that because we would have budgeted $5 billion to reopen the Skeldon, Rosal, and the Edmore sugar estates, and that we will do. Unfortunately, we cannot open the Wales sugar estate because of the state in which it is in today, because of the state in which you would have reduced it today, selling out the materials as scrap iron. That was the trade. That was the trade of the Wales sugar estate. I can recall clearly, because I sat in the 11th Parliament, at the then Minister of Public Security, the Honorable Kemraj Ramjitan, saying that he's right-sizing Gaisuku by closing down those estates. Right-sizing Gaisuku by putting 7,000 people out of job, most of whom are his fellow Barbicians. But he's right-sizing the industry. I would have heard too from the honorable member that how long do you want people to cut cane? Let them go and work in the oil industry. But I believe that the honorable know that the oil industry is a capital-intensive industry and not a labor-intensive industry. There is no way that the oil industry would be able to employ more than what Gaisuku employ. The upgrade of the West Demerara Hospital, the upgrade of the Leonora Hospital, the upgrade of the Diamond Hospital, and you will find that allocation in Budget 2020. That is another promise fulfilled. And since you're speaking about my colleague, the Honorable Minister of Sports, he will tell you in his presentation that you will have a multi-purpose complex in Linden very soon. You will have a multi-complex in Borbies. You will have one in Essequibo. And that shows, like my friend said, equitable distribution. We don't put an agricultural project in certain areas alone. We don't build stadiums in certain areas alone. And certain senior members will know about the agriculture project I'm referring to. We will build stadiums in Borbies, in Linden, and Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, I heard it was mentioned this morning about rollover projects. I'm a bit confused because the last budget that was passed in this country was passed in December 2018, and we are still talking about rollover projects in September 2020. Something is wrong. Something is definitely wrong here. Rollover from where? That is why you were rolled into the opposition. You were rolled on the opposite side of the house. Mr. Speaker, let me remind the opposition benches that our manifesto is a 5-year plan, not a 1-month plan. It is a 5-year plan. But I know, like many Guyanese, you have high expectations now too, because you are seeing what we can do. But you left us broke. You left us basically broke. So we have to rebuild from scratch like we did in 1992. And that is what we will do, because we are committed to building this country for all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, under our administration for the next 5 years, there will be a number of transformational projects that will take our country, as one presenter mentioned earlier, to the little Dubai of the Western Hemisphere, or the Singapore of the Western Hemisphere, the 4-lane Demerara Harbour Bridge, the high-span Demerara Harbour Bridge, which the AP and UAFC spent over $200 million to do a study for. Just a study, not a brick, not a load of sand, but $200 million just to conduct a study of building a new harbor bridge. We will build that in this term in office. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have already started talks with His Excellency the President of Suriname to have that bridge across the Quarantine River. That will open up untold opportunities for Guyanese and more so Barbicians in the field of tourism, in the field of trade. It will give us a direct market to Europe through Suriname. So we have already started talks, Mr. Speaker. We have already started talks with Brazil to do the Linden to Lethem Highway, which the AP and UAFC spent millions on a study again, on a study, but nothing has been done. Just a mere study has been done. Mr. Speaker, to address the issue of power generation, because we know we have it is high to produce electricity in Guyana. The government of Guyana will engage in a gas energy project within its forest storm in government so that the cost of electricity will be reduced by 50%. Will be reduced by 50%. And as a matter of fact, we have already set up a task force to start working on that gas energy project. The gas energy project, my friends, will bring investors to our country because we will have cheap power. It will create employment. It will create goods and services for our people. And these are some of the transformational projects that will make Guyana into a little Dubai under the People's Progressive Party administration. Mr. Speaker, if I may turn to some of the budget measures that would directly benefit the natural resources sector. $1.5 billion for hinterland roads. $1.5 billion for hinterland roads. And building the hinterland roads, Mr. Speaker, will not only benefit loggers and miners, it will benefit our Amerindian brothers and sisters who live in those areas and those regions and who have to travel through those almost impossible routes. We have heard tales and stories that many companies would have withdrawn their operations from the Peruni area because it is impossible to traverse through the Peruni Road as it is right now. Mr. Speaker, we would look at the opportunities of possibly bridging Oriala to Kokwani by having the Bisaruni Road done. This is something that would open up those communities. It was something that would increase the mining and logging activities in that area. So the $1.5 billion hinterland road is very much welcome by in the natural resources sector. And this will be supported by GGMC with almost another $1 billion so that our hinterland roads will be in a better state. Because you speak to any logger, you speak to any miner, the number one problem that they have is the infrastructure, is the roads. Because if we don't have roads, it carries up their production cost. We have better roads, our production will increase. Removal of VAT and reversal of duties on logging and mining equipment and machinery. The last administration claimed to be supportive of small miners and loggers, yet you impose VAT on machinery and equipment. We are removing that in only 1 month in office. Tax concessions on mining, agriculture, and forestry. Removal of VAT on hinterland travel. Mr. Speaker, we know that local travel is already expensive as it is. The AP and UAFC imposed VAT on local travel, not only hindering the loggers and the miners, but our Amerindian brothers and sisters who have to travel had to pay VAT on travel. This we will remove. Another promise fulfilled in only 1 month. Remove license requirements for mining equipment. And of course, we are going to amend the log export policy so that the forestry sector can bloom again, can breathe again. Because as we know it, the forestry sector, Mr. Speaker, is bankrupt. So we are going to amend the log export policy, which will enable people without concession, sawmillers, to export logs. As it is now, only people holding a concession can export logs. So we are going to change it to allow sawmillers to export logs, and of course, while still encouraging that we have value added forest products. So we are going to encourage that they export the lesser used species that is not used on the market. That is the intent of the amending the log export policy. Our new government would buy 50 new 4x4 vehicles to support security in the mining, logging, and hinterland regions. Mr. Speaker, this is very critical in the mining and logging sector. Security is of utmost importance, especially when it comes to mining and gold miners transporting the gold. The PPPC government has listened and we have delivered in that we will be purchasing 50 new 4x4 vehicles to boost the security in the hinterland regions. Mr. Speaker, the speaker before me, the Honorable Cathy Hughes, mentioned in her presentation that there was no consultation. Apparently, Honorable Member Broom, other Member Hughes, is not au fait as to what is happening in Guyana. Our ministers, this team of ministers here, have been in almost every single community and every single region in only 1 month. In only 1 month, almost every single community in every single region, even though we are faced with a COVID pandemic. The Ministry of Natural Resources has held consultations with a number of organizations, including the Guyana Gold Diamond Miners Association, the Women Miners Association, the National Mining Syndicate, which was established by former Minister Brooms and became a political body, is now willing to work to ensure that we move forward the sector. The Aichuni Forest Producers Association, the Upper Borbies Demerara Forest Producers Association, the Forest Producers Association of Guyana, the Guyana Manufacturing and Service Association, representatives of the National Tashau Council, and a number of small and medium-scale loggers and miners. We would have held consultations with all these groupings to ensure that their voices are heard and their needs are reflected in Budget 2020. Mr. Speaker, I know my time is running, so I would like to go directly into the Guyana Forestry Commission. I would like to go into the Guyana Forestry Commission proper. In order to bring relief to a sector that was terribly mismanaged and on the decline, Mr. Speaker, the Guyana Forestry Commission is bankrupt. Sadly so. It is unable to pay the staff members. It is unable to pay NIS contribution. It is unable to pay GRA. It is unable to pay GPL. It is unable to pay union dues. It is unable to pay the 2018 25,000 bonus announced by the AP and UAFC government. As of today, those staff were not paid their bonus since 2018 December of $25,000 each. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in 2014, the Guyana forestry sector had a net surplus of approximately 211 million Guyana dollars. A net surplus of 211 million Guyana dollars. We had an export earnings of over 53 million US dollars. Unfortunately, by 2019, our export was
Honorable
reduced
Member, 2 minutes notice.
by over 20 million US dollars. Mr. Speaker, I would have listened to the Honorable Raphael Trotman, former Minister of Natural Resources, when he mentioned that 600 hectares was given for conservation. That is quite commendable. But at the same time, 6,000 hectares were given to friends and cronies and families who cannot even work the land as we speak here today, who have not even had the capacity and resources to work those land. And that is a reason why today the Forestry Commission is faced in that state. Worse yet, the Iokorama is bankrupt. Iokorama is now seeking a subsidy from the government to maintain their operation. And because of their lack of resources, they are unable to monitor the preservation. So illegal logging and illegal mining has taken over today. Thanks to the PPPC government, we are going to give them some money so that they can carry out their operation. And it is strange as to why our Kurama is in this state today. It is because of the AP and UFC failure to nominate the 4 persons to sit on the board so that the board can seek donations from overseas organizations. The board hasn't been functioning for the last 3 to 4 years because the then government failed to appoint 4 persons on that board. That's the reason. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister, you will need an extension to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to propose that my honorable member has 5 minutes more to conclude his speech.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, you can continue to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Member Trotman also mentioned, and rightly so, that in 2015 to 2020, Guyana had the highest gold declaration. That is true. That is true. Merely because of Troy resources and Guyana gold fields that were brought here by the PPPC administration. But it's strange enough, Mr. Speaker, at my first meeting with the head of the gold board, it was reported that we have an overdraft of almost 4 billion Guyana dollars. An overdraft of almost 4 billion Guyana dollars. Mr. Speaker, because of time, I will go to petroleum production. Please. Mr. Speaker, oil can be a blessing or it can be a curse, as we all know it, but it depends on the management of the sector. To avoid the resource curse and achieve resource opportunity, an inclusive, nonpartisan, transparent, and balanced approach must be implemented. And we intend to take this approach so that we will establish the Petroleum Commission, which will be tabled back in Parliament very soon. Mr. Speaker, since the new administration has been in office, the Ministry of Natural Resources has undergone institutional changes, whereby the Department of Energy is now under the Ministry of Natural Resources. The Department of Energy previously functioned in a policy direction capacity, technical and operational capacity, and basically operated without much guidance. Under the PPPC administration, the Department of Energy will be converted into a professional technical unit to manage this sector. And I want to say and put on record that as of today, no one from the Department of Energy has been dismissed or sent home, and that the team is actively involved in the Payara negotiations with Exxon, GGMC, and EPA. As we speak, they are currently meeting to trash out issues so that we can get that license agreement. Mr. Speaker, it is our intention that the Department of Energy and the Petroleum Department at GGMC will be subsumed into the Petroleum Commission within the shortest period of time, so that there will be less political interference and the sector can be managed by non-politicians. Mr. Speaker, the AP and UFC spoke so much about oil and gas, but we are surprised to realize that there is no proper financial infrastructure architecture in place to manage this new sector. There is no proper natural resource fund, even though one was passed in 2019 after the no confidence motion. But we need to ensure that we repeal or amend this bill so that it is insulated from political interference and define how the funds flow into the budget and how it is used. As mentioned, the Petroleum Commission bill will retable because this bill was tabled in 2017. It was sent to select committee based on our argument that it is giving the Minister of Natural Resources too much power. Even though we are on an opposite side today, we still hold the same position that we don't want a bill that will empower or give the Minister of Natural Resources all power over the Commission. The Commission must be independent. Mr. Speaker, on the local content framework, His Excellency has already established a high panel team, and that team will soon start consultations and workshops with the relevant stakeholders so that we can have a proper local content policy in place and a regulatory legal framework to ensure that Guyanese benefit from the oil and gas sector. Because we can talk about local content policy, but if we don't have a legal framework, how are we going to safeguard benefits for Guyanese? Mr. Speaker, we will actively engage in a robust CSR program because we believe that CSRs can benefit the communities throughout the entire regions. And we believe that training also is important. So we will invest heavily in training from 2021. We have already had talks with the Indian government, with the Chinese government, and with a few other partners to have scholarships on oil and gas, to have courses on oil and gas offered to young Guyanese who can benefit from this sector. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity also to re-announce Guyana's 18th oil find. 18th oil find in the red tail exploration well. Mr. Speaker, this will already add to the Liza 1 and Liza 2. So once Payara is approved too, Mr. Speaker, because currently we are engaged in negotiation, that is the technical and legal teams and not politicians. The technical and legal teams are engaged in negotiations with Exxon and the other bodies, so that when we have a production license, it reflects the will of the people, and the benefits from it goes to Guyanese, and it don't only go to the company. Mr. Speaker, since the new administration has been in office, we have ensured that we review the work of BFAs that was working on the Payara Field Development Plan. Even though we are pushed for time because of the election impasse and the last 5 months that we lost, we have not signed that agreement because His Excellency would like to be comfortable that when he's signing an agreement, he signed an agreement that will benefit Guyanese. That is why we would have engaged the Canadian government for assistance to re-examine the field development plan that is being done by BFA's consultancy. And that consultation is ongoing. Consultation is on. Mr. Speaker, I must admit that since being in office for approximately 1 month, we have been working mostly on the Payara agreement, which will benefit Guyana, as well as the local content policy, which will benefit Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, in concluding, I stand firmly before you, committed to this task, and assure you that we plan to strengthen our institutional capacity and adopt a strong legislative and regulatory framework for the sustainable management of our nation's natural resources through the programs, plans, and projects that I've outlined to you before. I wish to conclude with a quote from the famous and great Nelson Mandela. Action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world. Thank you.